As the Philadelphia Phillies seek to upgrade their roster and make some changes internally, JT Realmuto has been a surprising name to enter the conversation. A recent report has surfaced connecting the Phillies catcher as a potential trade piece as they look to shake up their roster and find a way to improve. We're going to dive into the latest for what we know on the reports, if this makes sense for the Phillies team, and everything else regarding the outlook for JT Realmuto. So to dive right into it, I do want to start off with this report saying, in a recent poll done by ESPN's Jesse Rogers, an anonymous MLB executive named JT Realmuto as a trade candidate. Quote, while most of the players our panel picked have been at least mentioned in offseason trade speculation, one name selected caught us by surprise, Realmuto. Would the Phillies trade their star catcher ahead of his final season before hitting free agency? One exec believes it could happen if Dave Dombrowski wants to shake things up after a division series exit in October. According to our voter, Realmuto might be the most tradable player on the Phillies roster outside of Bohm. So obviously there's been plenty of talks about the Alec Bohm trade conversations. I do think that's a more forward-facing and evident one, but JT Realmuto, a guy who I do believe is on the decline at this point in his career, and when we talk about upgrading this Phillies team, they are pretty landlocked at a lot of positions here. So do you think JT Realmuto is an option that this Phillies team will explore, and do you think it makes sense, Luke?
I don't think it's going to be a big headline. I don't think it's going to be like the Alec Bohm thing, but I think it's going to be a thing that if a team checked in, I think they'll listen. I mean, it's noted that they need to shake something up.
Right.
Whether it's Bohm, Castellanos, JT, like something is going to be shaken up this offseason. Does it make a ton of sense for JT? I don't know. On the one side of it, you have that JT, even though we've seen the decline, he's still a very consistent catcher. He's a 750 OPS guy with a 255, 260-ish average. That's going to give you, 15 homers, 20 homers in a full season. But on the flip side of this, he is now 33 by time opening day starts. He will be 34. It'll be the last year of his contract. Can't imagine he's going to get an extension after next year.
This is ancient
And
by catcher terms.
yeah, this is old. This will be year 12 for JT behind the plate. Just shows you how much of a freak athlete the dude is. I mean, he was a star quarterback. He played basketball. Like, the dude's got a lot of wear and tear on him, but he keeps just coming out and giving you like at least 100 games a year. I mean, before this year, 2021, 22, and 23 with the Phillies, he gave you over 130 games every season behind the plate. That I will tell you right now is not going to be the case next year. They've made it known that they want to get JT off of his feet more if he stays. This is why I think a priority this offseason needs to be a backup catcher. I don't think people want to see Garrett Stubbs out there for 70 games next year. I don't want to see Rafael Marchand out there for 70 games next year. I think he's dealt too much with injuries, and I don't think catcher is the position that you can have a guy that is too injury prone. I think you need to have a stable backup. If JT goes down and you bring in an injury prone catcher for a month and something goes wrong, you're screwed. You are screwed. Granted, this deadline for Stubbs and the non-tender thing is tomorrow. My thought here is I think they're going to offer Garrett Stubbs something. I think Garrett Stubbs will be back in the organization.
Really?
What I think is going to happen is I think they're going to send him down to the minors. And I think it's going to be a little weird, but he does have a minor league option left. So the issue sort of right now is that he does and Marchand doesn't. So once they bring Marchand up, Marchand has to stay in the majors. They could DFA him, but he would most likely get picked up by a team. So I think they're almost going to treat Stubbs like an insurance policy next year. He's obviously not going to get some huge contract. He made like $500K last year, I think. Like, it's not going to be a big money, but he knows the clubhouse. He knows the pitchers. Like, if something goes wrong, it's not some random catcher from the minors, right? It's going to be a guy. But really, back to the JT thing, I just don't know how much sense it makes. Like, if the right deal came along and you knew for a fact that you had a catcher in free agency that you were confident in signing and bringing in and having him play 70 games next year and having Marchand back him up, maybe. But I don't know if you're going to get a better catcher in free agency than JT.
Yeah.
That's my thing. And I don't think JT is some great baseball player anymore, but he still gives you a good bulk behind the plate. He still gives you the balls in play. Like compared to most catchers, he's still a good catcher. It's just you put him next to guys on this team like Bryce and Trey, and you sort of look at JT's contract and you have the whole best catcher in baseball thing from years ago, and that kind of lingers. And if you haven't accepted that he isn't the best catcher in baseball anymore, you need to do that right now. If you're watching his video and you still think JT is the best catcher in baseball, I'm here to inform you that he's not. So the bottom line is they need to have options next year. They can't go in the next season with just JT, but I still just don't think trading him is probably your best option.
Yeah, you hit on a lot there that I thought was really good. I do want to start with the conversation, the backup catcher spot. I'm surprised to hear you say that about Stubbs. I personally was of the mindset that I didn't expect him in a Phillies uniform pretty much at all next year. You made a great point as far as the insurance policy and that being a tactic, but I also kind of viewed it as when talking about shaking up the vibes of a team, the chief vibes officer might be the first guy on the chopping block there. So I do think people are sick of Garrett Stubbs. I think he's a better baseball player than he gets credit for, to be perfectly honest. He is not just a class clown. The dude can play a little bit. So I think he does get a bit of a bad rap there. When talking about Marchand, do you just not think he's ready for a whole season? I was pretty impressed with what we saw from him last year. You don't think that's legit?
I think it's legit. I just and listen, I wouldn't mind Marchand being the backup next year. I just think there's guys out there that could give you more experience as a backup. And I don't know. I once again get worried about the injury thing with Marchand. He's now been hurt, I believe, his last 4 seasons at some point. I don't know. Something about it screams me once he gets to the pros, I think it could just still linger.
Gotcha.
Especially if he's out there catching 80 games. Because ideally next year, if JT is still here, JT catches like 80 games max next year.
Wow.
That's like 80, 90 games. I think it's almost like a 60-40 split. And your goal is to have a backup catcher that you can trust to play 65 to 70 games next year. Because it's obvious that JT can't catch a full season anymore. His knees are getting down. The bat is not nearly what it was, although it's still pretty good. But I would love to look for experience in the backup catcher market rather than young and hopeful for the future.
Okay, that makes sense to me. And for what it's worth, like that was something they mentioned pretty heavily at the postseason press conference, speaking about the wear and tear, or it might even been post the playoff, whatever the case may be. That they talked about how JT was pretty worn down the stretch there. So definitely something to keep in mind. To kind of make the case from the article here on JT being shipped out, it writes, Realmuto is entering his age 34 season, which is also the final campaign of his 5-year, $115.5 million contract. He hit .266 with 14 home runs, 47 RBIs at a 751 OPS this past year, so he's definitely still providing value. But it's also fair to say that he's no longer the best catcher in baseball, a title he held for a prolonged stretch given the stress that playing that position puts on your body. The executive referred to Realmuto as being tradable, which is probably true considering any team that would be taking on the 3-time All-Star would only be committing to his $23.875 million salary for 2025. The Phillies would probably struggle to find a team willing to take on that money they owed to, say, Trey Turner right now because it's for such a long time. That likely wouldn't be for Realmuto. But another factor to consider here is that another thing you have to consider here is that Realmuto has a 10-5 rights because he's been in the league for 10 years and played for his current team for at least 5 years. That gives him a full no-trade clause, even though his contract didn't include one. So Realmuto would have to be on board with any trade. If he says he's not interested in going anywhere, that would be that. So important caveat there. I'll also note with JT specifically, even when he was at his best at the plate, what's always impressed me the most about him is defensively how good he is and the way that he calls a game. He's got an absolute laser for an arm, and that still continues to be the case there. So I don't think he would be harmful to keep having around. And when I look around and assess the rest of Major League Baseball, yes, the crown has been taken for JT being the best, but he's still better than a whole lot of options out there. So I'm not eager to get this guy out of here.
That's sort of where I'm at too. Is like he's not the best anymore, but like if you look at a lot of these catchers around baseball, like he's still right middle, probably towards the top
Yeah.
half of the middle pack. Like he's still a solid catcher. I think people sort of once again just kind of get tied into the BCIB thing from the past. I think that definitely affects some people's look on him. And I will say the decline is there, and it's obvious. Like he's not the player he was in 2019. He's
Sure.
not the player he was in 2021 when he got like MVP votes. Like that's not the player that's here anymore. But he has experience with these pitchers. These pitchers love pitching to him. He calls a pretty good
Yeah.
game. I still don't think he calls the best game,
Wow.
but he's good behind the plate. The bat is solid enough. I think JT will be here next year. The biggest thing for me is I would love them to get a solid veteran, somewhat non-pricey guy to be right behind him next year.
Yeah, almost a platoon situation could be happening there. So
Exactly.
maybe
Yeah.
that.
Like a 60-40 split with JT next year. Get him off his feet, but still keep him out there. Like I can't imagine. I cannot imagine that if the Phillies wanted to trade JT and they went to him, I'd be shocked if he approved the trade.
Yeah, he
Like
seems like he
I,
wants to
I
be here.
think JT wants to be here, and I think that will obviously be the biggest factor in this. Is if a trade were to go, I think there's a better chance that he says no to it than yes.
Which that means something to me, to be perfectly honest. If you want to be
Yeah.
here, if you want to keep going to battle, dude, let's rock. So I'm not in a rush to get rid of JT Realmuto. Interesting to see his name climb in the conversation. I get the frustrations and wanting to shake things up and still totally stand by it. It's fair to assess he's not what he once was, but I still think the grass is not always greener when having these conversations. So ultimately, we'll see what the reports are as things get a little bit more concrete. Let us know what you guys think in the comments. Is this something the Phillies should consider a bit more than we're leaning into right here in this video? But ultimately, as always, make sure you're smashing that subscribe button, dropping a like on this video, and me and Luke will be back talking with you next time. Peace.